Morena koutou. Hey, look, sorry we're starting a little bit late this morning. We had a little bit of a false start, but we're here now. Before we get started, I'm just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. So no mai, haere mai, welcome to the webinar that we're holding for industry on the consumer care obligations to help you understand the decisions that we've made and the obligations that you'll need to understand to be compliant from 1 January for those that it applies to. So just a quick reminder that this session is recorded. We'll be sharing the slides and information afterwards. We welcome your question, your partai, so we'll be getting to those questions at the end of the webinar, so please pop them into the Q&A function. If you have any issues during the webinar with viewing the screens, viewing the slides, please do let us know in the chat. We've got a couple of our kaimahi monitoring from the outside to let us know if there's any issues. The other thing that I will quickly mention is that if you were on our quarterly update yesterday, you'll know that we've got some construction happening above us at the moment. So if that interferes in any way, please do let us know if you need us to repeat anything. We know there was some noise interruption yesterday. So I'm going to introduce these two lovely wahine next to me in a minute, but I'm going to get us all started with karakia. If you know, please join along. So inoi tātou. Kia tau ngā manakitanga a te mea ngaro, kia runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia te hua mā kihikihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, kia tūturu ka whakamaua kia Tina, Homie, Huie, Tai, Kia. Fantastic. Awesome. So on our agenda today, I'm going to be handing over shortly to Ginny Murray and Carolina Rodriguez, who are going to be leading the two key sections of this webinar. So Carolina's going to talk you through the overview of the consumer care obligations, how we responded to feedback and made final decisions, our staged implementation, so the 1 January and 1 April points that you will need to have these obligations in place by, and then our consultation on EIEP4A, which is super easy to say, and then I'll be handing over to Ginny, who is doing the compliance approach, so what we're doing to support consumers and implementing those requirements before 1 January. So Carolina, I will pass over to you.
Thank you, C, and thank you everybody in the line. It's been a busy year. And everybody has worked really hard to get these obligations out. I think it's a very important milestone for everybody in the industry, for consumers, retailers, and us. The consumer care obligations are really the foundation for our ongoing journey on consumer protections. Over the last 10 months, we've been doing an operational review of the guidelines. We have done consultation, we have done workshops, we have done engagement with industry participants, consumer advocate groups, consumers, and we're really happy and satisfied that the obligations mean a consistent care standard for all residential consumers, and also clear and workable, pragmatic and practical obligations for retailers without stifling innovation. The journey began with the consumer care guidelines, but we did receive overwhelming feedback last year in the consultation we did that we required consistent obligations that were enforceable and enduring over time. Well, the submissions were very detailed, and we really want to underscore the feedback we received. It was absolutely incredible, the amount of support we received from consumer groups, for retailers. So this is a massive win and an example of something that when we are all together, we put out something with really high quality to protect consumers. Well, we kept the structure of the guidelines, which really are the journey that retailers and consumers and customers go through from even before they join until, things like when payment difficulties arrive and fees and bonds. So we did we did changes, we did improvements, we did simplification, we did operational improvements. And just to give you a couple of examples, and then we can talk about them in more detail if you have any questions. But all over the parts of what they used to be the guidelines and now they are obligations, we did improvements. Just to mention a couple, in part 8, for instance, we changed the protections on medically dependent consumers. So now they have to notify us if by accident a retailer disconnect a medically dependent consumer. We also provided clarification. There were lots of retailers who asked us, does that mean that we have to provide consumer care policies in all the languages available? We said, no, you don't. So we did along the lines of all the parts, operational improvements. Well, the applicability of the obligations, all the obligations are really applicable to retailers that sell electricity to residential consumers. We have a definition of residential consumers, and there are a couple of obligations that are also applicable to distributors. This is in relation to, in particular, to medically dependent consumers, but there's also a couple of obligations that are only for retailers that are traders. So if you do not sell electricity to residential consumer, but you are a trader, you still have to comply with 2 obligations that we can discuss later as well, if you have any questions about it.
Fantastic. And just to remember to chuck those questions into the Q&A function. We'll be getting to those at the end.
Okay, so we did a staged approach implementation. This is in recognition of the feedback we received from retailers that they needed time for change systems and train their staff. So there are 2 obligations that will be in place from 1st of January 2025. These 2 key protections are the first one, Clause 37, that has a restriction to not disconnect medically dependent consumers. And if medically dependent consumers are accidentally disconnected, they must inform us immediately using a prescribed form. And the second clause is Clause 68, that says that all fees charged by retailers must be reasonable. All the other obligations are enforceable from 1st of April 2025.
If we talk a little bit about those 2 obligations that are coming into play from 1 January.
Yes, let's do it. So the first one is Clause 37, that from the 1st of January 2025, a retailer must not disconnect a postpaid customer's premises if a retailer knows a medically dependent consumer may be living there. So this applies if the retailer has recorded a medically dependent consumer under the consumer care guidelines. That can be a verified or a non-verified customer or consumer. If the retailer receives an application in any form, and we can talk about the forms of medically dependent consumers later. And even if they haven't decided the outcomes of that application yet, and if the retailer, becomes aware of any relevant information.
Great, so just a clarification on that, Cara. So if a consumer had applied to their retailer and said, I want to be a medically dependent consumer and I'm working through the proof, during that process, that consumer cannot be disconnected.
That's correct. So the retailer has some time to do the process and to verify, to satisfy themselves that that is a proper and a legitimate application. But within that time frame, they have to treat their customer or their consumer as a medically dependent consumer. So there are things you need to do in order to be able to comply with this obligation. First, we ask you to check your processes to receive, request, record, and any processes regarding your medically dependent consumer applications. We also ask you to check your disconnection processes and that you check your information about medically dependent consumer before you proceed with the disconnection, and that you train your staff. Okay, so if by accident, we recognize that accidents may happen, you disconnect a medically dependent consumer, you must inform us immediately using the prescribed disconnection notification form. This form will be available in our website very shortly, hopefully early next week.
And we will let you all know as soon as that's up online.
Okay, so we want to tell you a little bit of our process that will happen when or if we receive that notification. We will acknowledge receipt and log in the incident. We will contact you or any support services if needed. We will assess any potential breaches, and we will monitor the reconnection and record any outcomes for our policy, the future developments. All right, and the second obligation that is in force and in place from 1st of January 2025 is that fees charged by a retailer to a customer must not exceed reasonable estimates of the cost and be reasonable. Okay, when this clause applies, it applies to all fees charged by retailers to residential consumers, and it includes disconnections or reconnection fees, fixed term contract termination fees. It does not apply to any other taxes, levies, or third parties like bank, credit card fees, or any other things that are not directly controlled by the retailer.
This is an important part for us on consumer education. So we're making sure that those parts that it does not apply to, consumers really understand that a reasonable fee can't be applied to the charge that is charged for your electricity price and supply.
What you need to do? Well, check your fees that are at a reasonable level that reflects the estimated cost of the activity the fee contributes to, and that is reasonable. I think this is really important to say that the policy intent of this really is to balance the precision with administrative and practical efficiency, and that you don't use your fees to cost any previous cost that you have incurred on, or that you don't generate an over profit on these type of fees.
We're just going to stop here for a little bit because we know that's quite a lot of information, and then coming into next year ahead of 1 April, there'll be a lot more information for you and your staff to get up to play with in order to be aligned with compliant with the consumer care obligations. We are building manuals, we are building support tools for retailers and distributors, but we also wanted to know a little bit about what would be helpful for you. So what is the most effective tool for you to support your staff understanding what needs to happen. So if you go to this Slido, and I think Vainui might be able to pop the actual link in there, but you can scan the QR code or go to Slido and pop in the code there. So just that Slido is going to be open throughout the whole webinar, so feel free at any moment to go in and vote on that. You can vote for multiple things. If you have any ideas outside of that space that we've put up there, please do let us know in the chat. We're really keen to hear your feedback on how we can support retailer and distributor education on the consumer care obligations. I'll hand back to you, Cara, to talk about EIE P4A.
Yes, so one more thing that we're doing this year in terms of consultation. We received significant feedback from distributors, and thank you all distributors in the call for all the feedback and engagement we had with you this year. We did receive information that the current protocol that you use to exchange information between the retailer and distributor wasn't great quality. It wasn't being shared at a speed and within timeframes that were adequate to protect medically dependent consumers. And so we are proposing a regulated form that is part of the 4 form. And so we're calling it EIEP4A. And the idea is that within this form, you share information between the trader and the distributor on medically dependent consumers. The idea is to restrict any personal information and only share information on an ICP level. So we issued the consultation paper on Tuesday, and the consultation will be open until the 28th of January, so we can all go and have our Christmas break, and you have time to come back to the office and give us your feedback, and we'll make a decision on the form in early February.
And we have made conscious effort to keep that a quite concise consultation so that it's easy for you to get through and we can get that into play as soon as possible. Vainui has popped the link there in the chat function if you haven't seen that already. Oh, if you do have any questions on that, feel free to get in touch with us as well. You know, we're happy to support. We really appreciate getting your valuable feedback on all of our consultations.
Vainui, if you also want to put my email there for anybody that doesn't have it, feel free to contact me directly with any questions you have.
Awesome. Well, kia ora, Cara. That was a beautiful presentation there. I'm going to pass over to Ginny now, and Ginny is going to go through some of the compliance side and consumer processes that we've built for the consumer care obligations. So, kia ora, Ginny.
Yeah, thanks, Sina. So what I'll do is I'll just outline quickly our monitoring and compliance reporting framework. So what you can see here is that we've got a brief outline of our reporting framework that we are going to put into place for the consumer care obligations. The annual compliance reporting regime is going to replace the existing annual alignment statements under the guidelines, and annual compliance reporting will also form the basis for compliance reporting. The remaining provisions, such as requesting information and independent review, will only be used when required. And what we'll do in the new year is we will provide you more guidance on how to complete those annual compliance reporting requirements closer to that time. And we'll obviously let you know that through the usual channels. How are we going to approach notifications around a consumer care breach? So what we've done is we've set up a new team which sits separate to the compliance team, adjacent to them, which will be focusing pretty much on just the consumer care obligations. In terms of participants, we expect people to report breaches through the usual compliance portal. So our compliance portal, we've made modifications to that. So that will accept notifications relating to alleged breaches around consumer care obligations. So nothing for you has changed in that regard if you're wishing to notify us of an alleged breach around the obligations. We're also obviously wanting to hear from consumers who think they have an obligation breach and have set up a landing page on our website for them. That also includes an 0800 number and a dedicated email address. So it's important to note that that landing page on our website is only for consumers. So when consumers go to that page, obviously there's information there around them around consumer care guidelines. And what they can do is they can fill in a self-assessment form where they just enter in a few details and just make sure that their concern that they have falls under the consumer care guidelines, obligations rather. And if it does, then they can then go on to complete a notification form online to then raise a concern with us. And then what we'll do is we'll be taking an educative approach initially around those alleged breaches and consider obviously what they're about and what we do with those. We'll be looking really closely at any obvious breaches, and obviously an example that Cara has raised is around medically dependent consumers being disconnected. So we'll be looking really closely at those, and we'll be also checking and analysing data to try and spot trends and issues that we think might be there within the marketplace. Okay. So the roles of Electricity Authority and Utility Disputes Limited. So we'll just pull out some key points here so that you're clear on what the roles are of each organisation. So the key points is that the authority will monitor retailers' compliance with the consumer care obligations. We will work with retailers to educate and ensure that they are complying with those obligations. We may investigate and we may take enforcement action for serious matters. It's important to note that we are not a dispute resolution scheme and we will not investigate all cases. On the other hand, Utility Disputes Limited, they are the mandated dispute resolution scheme for the energy sector. They provide free, independent and fair dispute resolution services for the electricity sector, and utility disputes can consider any consumer complaints about their electricity retailer. How will complaints be managed? So important to note that if a consumer makes a complaint to the Electricity Authority and UDL, Utility Disputes Limited, then both UDL and the Authority can look at the concern at the same time. But it's important to remember that the Electricity Authority can only look at the alleged breach of the code. UDL may assist in trying to resolve the complaint between the consumer and their retailer separately. And with the consumer's permission, the Electricity Authority and UDL may share information related to that issue. So if a complaint comes to UDL and they think it's also an alleged breach, UDL will also refer it over to the Authority while they handle that complaint. And if an alleged breach comes to the Electricity Authority, the consumer can be referred to UDL in the first instance. So we're obviously working with UDL, we think, pretty well. They will continue to operate business as usual in taking consumer calls. And the Authority will also be referring consumers to their retailers and or UDL to resolve disputes. We also recently requested that retailers provide their general and emergency contact information to us. The general number provided to consumers if consumers would like to contact retailers. The emergency contact information will not be provided to consumers, but it will be used by the Authority to contact the retailer in an urgent situation. So we're asking you to please provide that information by the end of today. Now I think I'll pass back to Cara for one last slide.
Yes, so we are working on providing further guidance on things that, like we have received questions from you already, and, specific things that might help you to get ready for the April tranche of obligations. We will communicate with you over all our channels. And so, we are here to support you. We are here to provide further guidance, answer any questions. And if we can just open the space for you to ask any questions, we are here for you.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll just give a quick update on our Slido from earlier, which has been really helpful. So we can see that webinars is the most helpful thing for retailers and distributors at the moment. That's coming out on top. But with comprehensive guidance and videos coming in close behind. So it looks like there's a range of tools there that we can support you with. I think probably early next week, we're going to be providing some of that detailed guidance on the MDC, so with Clause 37 and Clause 68, and we will be sending those out on our website, but we'll contact retailers and distributors as well. So if there are any questions, I'm just jumping into the Q&A now for the team, but if you just a reminder to send those through. And I've got a question here from Paul that says, hi there, can I have a view around what is deemed objectively reasonable? Some fees can be high due to the costs involved, i.e. meter tests or remote reconnections. The actual cost of these can run into the high hundreds or more, and retailers often will not pass these on but may wish to. I'm keen to understand that if the retailer passes on the actual cost only, that this will be acceptable as long as the customer is informed and has agreed prior. That sounds pretty accurate to me. Cara, do you have any thoughts there?
Thank you, Paul, for that question. Yes, so look, we know that the word reasonable can mean many things. We also know that the industry and retailers in general have very diverse types of operations. Some are, to support rural customers, and so the costs vary a lot. We are going to provide guidance on what our expectation is to be reasonable, but one of them is absolutely that they are cost reflective.
Fantastic. Hopefully that's answered your question there, Paul. I think I've got one here that's more for you, Ginny. So this is from Neil. I have a question about your reference to UDL referring potential consumer care obligation breaches to the authority. That has not been confirmed by UDL, given most complaints could raise a potential obligations breach, and the process remains under discussion. So Neil, I think you might be joining us from UDL. Yes.
Yeah, so thanks, Neil. So that's a comment, that's something that we are working through, and I acknowledge what you've said there. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. And once we've got that process all firmed up, we can come back and confirm it with everyone. We are, we're still waiting on a few more questions, but remember to chuck those in. Just checking that none have come through from the chat. Maybe in the meantime, Cara, we can talk a little bit about the consumer care, the medically dependent consumers, the forms, the updated forms. So I know that we've been working on those for a little bit. We're now engaging with Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand on making sure those forms work for GPs. But in the meantime, we are asking people to use the old form that is available and we'll have online for people. But that new form will help us be more in line with the obligations, won't it?
Yeah, that's right. So in the obligations, we made a couple of changes. We don't expect customers, if the form comes from the customer, or the consumer, they can use any form they want. We don't need them to use any prescribed form. And this is to prevent, creating more trouble to customers that are already in need. But if the retailer is aware of it and wants to send a form or sends a form to the customer, they should and they must send the prescribed form. So we are working with the Whatu Ora, we're testing the form with medically dependent consumers themselves. And so we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that the form is fit for purpose and that is clear for everybody and easy to use.
And that will be available on our website ahead of 1 April, as that's when those obligations kick in. But we know you might have quite a few consumers of your own customers coming through to you from 1 January because of the clause 38. 37 obligations. So we will have the other one up on the website. We're working through a lot of website updates at the moment to get all of the information online for both consumers and retailers and distributors. Look, we seem fairly light on the questions, team, so I'll just give a couple more minutes if there are any other questions to come through. Otherwise, you can feel free to send those through to us and we can answer them afterwards. You can come to us directly. Is there anything else that we might want to pass on to retailers and distributors? Maybe anything around the EIE P4A?
No, I think that's all good. By Nui, if you can also post our consumer care email into the line. If anybody has any questions, please contact us. There's not such a thing as a silly question. And I think we have also received some CCOs. Well, anyway, we have already received some questions, and so I think we are going to put them in the guidance we're going to provide, in the manual that we're going to provide, because we think that if one person has had the question, many others may benefit from the answer.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining us online today.
Sorry, I don't want you, Vainoi is just going to post the correct consumer care. Thank you, Vainoi. That's the correct email address. That's all good.
Good catch there, Jenny. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to close this out with a karakia in a second, but just from us here at the authority, in case we don't engage with you all again, thank you for all of the mahi that you have given to us to help with our decision making. We really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday period with their whānau and their friends, and keep reaching out to us, keep engaging with us, and if you would like to join in on the closing karakia, please feel free to. I'm just going to share my screen there so you can see that. And here we go. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia waitia ai te ara, kia tūruki whakataka ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai. Haumie, huie, tai kie. Wonderful, thank you everyone.